Sean, Bridget, thanks for being here. Thanks for hopping on our first JMS educational meeting of 2025, getting started in medical research. I think this panel right now here, we have a broad coverage of all interests, very deeply entrenched in research to talk about this. I think this is a really important conversation to have, especially at NEOMED, where, we are a school that doesn't necessarily have our own affiliated like research hospital as some other medical schools have. And so kind of having a conversation about research and discussing about how to get started in it, what to look out for, what to do is a super important conversation to have. I'm going to pass the rock to let's start with Sean. You want to give us a background?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining virtually. My name's Sean Hergenrother. For those who don't know me, I'm a fourth year medical student, originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, but I went to undergrad at Marquette University, as you can see here. Um, and I'm interested in neurology, and I think neurology as a field, and just kind of my personality lends to it very well. I like to go into these deep rabbit holes, get in the weeds, if you will, about things. So this was it was a kind of match made in heaven for this field for me, and research as well, because research obviously, in order to get something out there, worth publishing, you kind of have to do something no one's ever done, which is an exciting prospect. So that's kind of how I got interested in research. I like to know the way things work. And there's that reason, and then there's the very practical reason of in a post step one pass fail world, it's important to differentiate yourself for residency programs and to show that you're willing to work on something long term and have exposure to medical writing early on. So that's what I would say.
Great points. Bridget?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Bridget Devine. I'm an M3. Thanks for joining. I'm from Cincinnati also, actually, and I'm interested in ophthalmology the most right now. And that's what all my research has primarily been in medical school. I started doing research when I was kind of on the younger side. I was in high school when I joined my first research lab. And I really just joined it because I was always curious about like exploring kind of like Sean, like just diving deep into my scientific questions. And I think that it's been really challenging to keep up that mentality in medical school because it's such like a necessary thing that we have to do is do this research if you want to go into certain fields, especially. So I think it's just been really important for me to do projects that I'm passionate about, even if they might not be the most high yield in terms of churning out like, several publications per project or something like that. But um, just, it's good to keep your interest by doing projects you're passionate about, and that's what I've been trying to do. So that's my intro.
That was a great intro. I'll complement that with my own. I'm Shahab. I'm an M2 here at NeoMed. I'm interested in orthopedic surgery. I'm originally from California. I started research here at NeoMed actually in my master's year, and it's carried on throughout. One thing I might say that's a little bit different about my experience than yours, Bridget, in at least in orthopedic surgery, one of my earliest meetings with Dr. Stofko, we went over Texas Star for like the average amount of publications. Students who applied and matched in orthopedic surgery in the residency one of the residencies I was targeting was 10. So unfortunately, I'm in a field where you do kind of have to be in that rat race to get a publication. And you might not necessarily be able to pursue things that you're really passionate about. But I'm super happy to hear that's not the case in ophthalmology and you get to go and do to really enjoy. And just I'm not making a comment on either or. I'm just saying, there's different landscapes that it's important to be aware of them and to kind of navigate. With that being said, I think I'm going to open the floor to some questions. Um, Sean, I'm going to ask. You did give an introduction. Would you like to go into why you chose to do research, or do you want to go into our second question? I think you kind of
Yeah,
did.
I can kind of tee it up. Yeah, thanks,
Sure.
Shahab. So when I was a bright-eyed, bushy-tail M1, um, going into my M2 year, during that summer, I had an opportunity to do some research with, it was really an amazing experience in an outside hospital in Wisconsin. And I didn't know what I was getting into. It was my first like time stepping into the clinical realm. And lo and behold, a case came through and it was something we'd never seen before, very interesting. So my attending says to me, "Why don't you write this up?" Which is a phrase that if you're not familiar with, you may be familiar with if you're looking to do research during the third and fourth year, especially. So me very excited, being like, "Oh my gosh, yes, I'm very excited. I'll look into all this, I'll write it up." So this is kind of like a cautionary tale. So um, it was a case report, and we
Mhm.
were going to try to publish in the highest journal, neurology. Okay, already not a good idea. Case reports, very difficult to get published, especially in like top journals. Second problem, it was just me and an attending. And this attending was like a world-class leader. He was flying across the country to give talks. He was running 11 different clinical trials at that time. Very busy guy, to say the least. So he was not always responding to a medical student's email, um, or anyone's email that's way more important than me. So this is my second point is kind of know your personnel, who you're working with. Always have
Mhm.
someone who's low, like a med student or a resident, someone that you feel comfortable talking to, bringing up questions as they arise, because they will always arise when you're writing research, especially the first time. Um, long story short, we go back and forth with this journal, no go. We go back and forth with the next journal up, like I think it was JAMA Neuro, no good. So eventually it did not get published, but I'd spent like hours and hours poring over edits and formatting and journaling, trying to specify for each journal. All that to say, they didn't get published because it's difficult. So kind of know what medium you're working with. Case reports, like I said, much harder to get published. Reviews, meta-analyses, more work, certainly, but also more readily publishable data there. So if you're trying to get more publications out, that's often a route to go. Or if you're very good at writing and have something truly unique, you can publish a case report in like a lower tier journal, and that'll work fine. But I wanted to get that out there because I'll be referring to it back later. So thank you.
Yeah, I love that story. I can also say that just from what I've seen, a lot of journals don't even accept case reports. So you got to even a narrower field to work in. And getting like 2 to 5 year follow up also is just quite a journey. If you want to do like something prospective. So yeah, I think it's a great cautionary tale for our what do you say, bushy eyed or bright eyed M1s trying to
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
something
trying
like
to get
that.
into some early research. Case reports might not be the way to go, and I love how you mentioned or you brought up like review studies, or even some retrospective stuff, much more publishable, and the trade-off between like the amount of time you put into it versus the prospect of getting something out of it, like an abstract or a poster or publication, is much higher. Bridget, we're gonna send it over to you. Any comments, thoughts?
Um, yeah, I think just in terms of like types of projects that you can do. I think, I mean, it's hard when you're first starting out to like know what the options are, but I also think like, don't feel constrained by like, oh, you can either do, a review or like a randomized control trial, which, some of those things can take a really long time. And I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but like it's really difficult sometimes to get in touch with the right people to that you can have a good team that can actually get a project done. Like, and like it's hard to get in touch with attendings. Like Sean said, like a lot of them are busy. They have conferences, they have clinical duties, they have, families, all kinds of things. Um, so don't be afraid to like think outside the box. And if you and your friends want to get together and collaborate on a review or something of a topic that you're interested in. Find, find somebody at NEOMED who's willing to be your PI. And there's, that is completely a valid option and that can get published just as much as any other journal can. My friends and I were having trouble getting research when we were M1s, and we had a clinical idea about improving care for people with disabilities. And so we started a bench to bedside project, which isn't necessarily like this type of research that we're talking about, but it was actually a jumping off point for we have a review article. It's, hopefully going to get published. We have a couple projects. We're submitting a patent right now. And so that's kind of turned into like a different type of project that isn't maybe traditional research, but also can really stand out in an application. And we really just had to get together and kind of that was like our own idea that we just came up with, and we found an attending who was willing to support that. So don't feel like you have to wait for someone to give you an idea or to give you a project, even though that is probably the best case scenario. Somebody's like, here's a project that you can do.
Yeah.
Here's a big team that can help you do it. But if it doesn't work out, you can definitely try it on your own too.
Yeah, those are some great points. I love the shameless plug of the bench to bedside program. It's an excellent thing we have here at NeoMed that, and I love that you had that story, but I'll also echo that I know several other people who've had that story of they maybe get into a bench to bedside project and they get a team together, right? They do that project throughout their year, and then at the end of it, they take it to a patent, or they become so knowledgeable in that topic that they're able to pursue something like a review amongst their team. And yeah, I echo the sentiment. If you get a group of people your buddies, maybe people in your interest group who share kind of the same topic, you guys can always band together to pursue a research project so long as you get someone to slap a PI at the end of it, like a PhD or an attending or a doc or someone to kind of sponsor you almost for that project. All really good points. I think that's a great collection of answers for our first question. I'm going to take to the next question. This might be a little bit out of my own curiosity, and the viewers might be interested. It's on basic versus clinical research. So I want to ask you guys if you have done both, please give an example of one of each, and then just talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each. Sean?
Yeah, sure. So also when I was in M1, very eager, I reached out to Dr. Malat since I'm interested in neuro and he was teaching neuro. It just made sense. And he's a newer PhD, so he has a lot of research running currently on hearing and in the inferior colliculus. And it was kind of fascinating to me at the time and with neurodegeneration as well. Still is fascinating. So I started probably January of my M1 year and have kind of I worked intermittently on a few wet lab projects running tissue. So um, I had some prior work with wet lab experience in undergrad. So I was able to work in his lab kind of seamlessly. And then I transitioned to other projects with like analyzing on a microscope. So very kind of far removed from like patients, obviously. I'm working with like very thin slices of rat brain and like cut on like electron microscopy slide and like looking at in a microscope and clicking dots on a screen is what it felt like to me at the time. But then, in the grand scheme of things, is we're looking at localization of neuropeptide Y and its distribution throughout the inferior colliculus and how that changes as we age. Um, It is actually very interesting. So the first R paper was published last month in Frontiers of Aging in Neuroscience. So it takes a long time. So like I was doing that 2 years ago, and it just got published this year. So it takes like 3 years, depending on when you enter the lab, of course. The timing can be right, and you can get in and get out in a year. But things generally move very slow in research, just full stop. But things move even slower at the basic sciences level because there is so much checks and balances and a lot of like making sure the data is ironclad, or else you'll be asked to redo it all. Um, Clinical research, on the other hand, is typically quicker. The example I gave with the case report, in my head, I thought it was going to be faster, and oftentimes it can be, depending on where you're applying or where you're submitting to. But clinical research also still, takes just as much time, um, but it typically is quicker, and you'll have more of a team actually writing most of it because you don't have to like collect the data as much and like run like experiments like that. So those are the kind of big differences. Clinical trials easier to kind of pump through, if you will. Um, Basic science more shows that you're committed to one project long term.
Bridget?
Yeah, and I will echo everything that Sean said. I've also done both. I did a bunch of basic science in college. And then when my summer after my M1 year, I did a like summer fellowship at Vanderbilt through like the NIH, like NIDDK, like diabetes research training program stuff. Um, 10 out of 10 would recommend. It was an amazing experience. However, like Sean said, like it is hard to get that stuff published, especially if you're only there for the summer. So like I am not going to have a publication from the summer. I had a very robust poster from the summer that I was able to present a couple times, but like probably won't have a publication. I was doing like type 1 diabetes autoimmunity studies about like the antibodies that are found up to like 20 years before diagnosis. And so we were culturing like human blood samples from children and like building up their antibody profiles over, and the lab was doing this over a period of like months to years. And it's like I came in, I was working with the antibodies, but like that study is nowhere near completion. When it is completed, it will hopefully yield great amounts of knowledge towards our understanding of that topic. But like for my own like benefit for my application to residency. Like the program was I think something for my resume and like I had posters and certainly the experience was well worth it. But just in terms of like what your goals are, if your goals are to turn out two publications in your summer or something like that would not be an appropriate step. However, I do think that my bench research was critical in like building my um like research skills as just like a researcher. It taught me to be thorough, it taught me to be detail oriented. Um, it taught me how to build like a question and explore it, and like how to get results from like kind of just like building a project in general. So like if you've never had bench experience, I would recommend it at some point if you're interested in learning, but also like it's a big learning curve. It's like physical skills you have to learn because you're doing actual lab work and then you have to wait for the data and then you have to, down the line write it up. So definitely it's slower, but it's very good for skill building. Clinical research is more like, in my opinion, like you kind of have to come in like having some basic clinic or like some basic research skills because like the attending is like not going to teach it to you
Yeah.
unless they do. I don't know. I've I have not experienced that personally. But like they kind of expect that you're gonna like know how to do research like in general or like you're gonna know like how to write up a research study. Like Sean said, he was just asked, "Oh, write this up." But
Mhm.
no one ever teaches you how to do that in clinical work. So I guess that's my opinion on that. But I think that they're both super valuable for their own reasons.
I agree. I love those answers. I'll try to put the cherry on top. In my experience, very similar to what you guys went through. I think maybe we can all agree that for M1s getting started, or really anybody getting started in medical research, one basic science experience is pretty good. It'll be a good way to build those initial skills. But I think we all echo that caution of, don't overdo it with the basic stuff. You want to be a doctor, you're pursuing matching a new residency program. The clinical stuff is what's going to carry you to the finish line. And that's been kind of my experience as well. I'm in the basic science lab with Dr. Safadi. I do spend a lot of time in there, but just like you guys said, we're doing bench work, we're looking at cells, we're doing surgeries on animals, and these things take a long time to get published, take a long time to get the data. And that's not necessarily saying it's a drag of a process. It's very thorough. Whereas in clinical research, just like you guys said, it's a lot quicker. You can rely on large like data banks and that kind of stuff. And the time from project inception to publication is shorter, and sometimes the impact is higher depending on like your field, right? The clinical stuff might be more relevant. So, echo everything you guys said. I'll give an example of some projects that I've done, like in Dr. Safadi's lab. We did a basic science project where we examined a protein, semaphore 3F, and its effects in destroying bone in cells. So we had to culture cells, grow them on the wells. I had to go into the histology lab and, just like you said, Sean, count dots on a screen. And then, you're at the whole manuscript and we're still waiting to even submit it. And I started working on this project in 23. So it's already been 2 years. That being said, though, I didn't go into that endeavor thinking I need a sub publication like right now. I was open to building those skills and I learned so much from that time. Whereas for the clinical stuff, I think over the summer, I turned around a project with a group of folks looking at pec tears, and we used registry databases and ran some CPT codes, and we got sample size and all that stuff, and we looked at risk factors for pec tears, and that's been submitted and it's under review. So 2 month turnaround time for that project. So that kind of, I think, gives a good idea of what that looks like in orthopedic surgery literature and journals and publication. And I think it's very similar to what you guys went through in your field. So I'm going to jump to the next question if you guys think that was a good wrap on that. I think this is a pretty good question. I just want to know, how did you guys start doing your research, or what was the first thing you did towards securing your first research experience at NEOMED specifically? So what did you do to get your foot in the door here on campus from your very first endeavor? And then what do you recommend people do to cross that threshold here at NEOMED?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way to do this is to reach out to someone who you know. And there was one person, the grade above me, who I knew from, we grew up in the same town. So I reached out to her. I said, hey, like, I'm interested in this. And she said, oh, and then connect me with Dr. Malat. So, and oftentimes, if they don't know who can connect you, they can point you in that direction. So Harmony on campus is a great resource. There's a document of, it's in like the career advising center, I think, on that Canvas page, with a bunch of different M4s, PGY1s, MDs who are in a bunch of different fields that they've volunteered to have their contact information there for you to contact them. Now, it's hard to cold email someone, but over time, that kind of awkwardness goes away. They think of us as colleagues more so than, inferior, whatever, medical students at this point, because that's the benefit of the alumni network at any institution. But at NeoMed specifically, I think people are very willing to help since it is difficult, often to get started in research. So I would highly recommend reaching out to Harmony, reaching out to someone in the class above you who's interested in the same specialty as you, and see if you can get connected.
Great points.
Yeah, I think that is a very wise approach. I did not do that. When I was an M1, I cold emailed literally everybody I could find on the internet. And that wasn't working because people don't really check their emails, I think, often, sometimes. Um, but I ultimately, like UH clinical research, like came to meet with my class one day and they said, like, email us if you want to be connected with someone. NeoMed was building their partnership with UH a lot at that time, and I emailed them. They connected me to my PI that I still do research with him now. So I've been working with him for like since like February of my M1 year. And that's been amazing. Like I would recommend reaching out to that department at UH if you're really lost for, I think like do what Sean said first. Like if you have contacts, like people who like Neomed people are always willing to help each other out. So just try that first. But if you're really struggling, like this is a great resource to email their clinical research department and say that you're a Neomed student, you're interested in X, Y, and Z, and do they have anybody they could connect you to? Because that's what I did, and maybe I got lucky, but it really worked out in my favor. Um, so I would recommend that as a next step after doing what Sean said. And cold emailing, like it eventually did work. Like this is also I was gonna say my cautionary tale is that I sent so many emails that then literally, I don't know how this happened, but in the same week, like five of them responded at once and were like, here's a chart review, here's this. And then all of a sudden I was like studying for my cardio exam and I had like several research projects that I had to do things for, which you do not want to be in that position. So I think if that does happen to you, just know that you can say no, or you can say not right now. Can I get back to you in a month when I have a more of a break or something? Um, because in reality, like they know you're a student, and if they're a good PI who really it has your best interest at heart, like they will understand. And I think my biggest anxiety was like, oh, if I say no to something, I'm never going to get that opportunity again. But all the people who I've had as PIs that have worked out so wonderfully has like they've been so supportive of like if I have an exam they care that I do well in the exam. They care that I'm doing well in school as my primary thing. And then like their research, they're just grateful that you're helping them. Um, so that would be my advice on that.
Yeah, Bridget, real quick, I want to highlight that last part you said. Like, as medical students, we don't realize we are such an asset to these docs, these PIs, these residents who have had projects and interesting cases build up, build up. We have the time. It doesn't feel like it sometimes, but compared to residents and definitely compared to attendings, we have so much time. So if we can take some of that and help to write, and oftentimes as a medical student, you are going to be writing the majority of papers, and residents will kind of just be putting in edits, and the attendings will kind of just do a last overview before submitting it. So we are an asset, we are a commodity. If you put yourself out there and say, "Hey, I'm willing to do this," and actually do it, that so many doors will open for you.
All great points. Um, Bridget, I will say it's almost fitting that we're on opposite sides of the screen because I got the polar opposite experience of you. When I first came in, but I totally understand what you're saying and I actually support what you're saying. But some advice I got when I was in M1, Dr. Stofka put me in contact with a former NEOMED medical student who had matched into the residency that I wanted to go to. And so when I had a conversation with this person, the advice they gave me, like probably the biggest take home advice they gave me at the end of the phone call was never say no to a project. Like even if you're overwhelmed, they're like, just figure it out. And I think that speaks volumes to maybe the wrong or previous or, more outdated mindset in medical research and what that load is on medical students. Because I agree with you, Sean. We do all the work in most cases, and we are valuable assets. But I think there is an expectation to kind of stretch yourself thin, and I think everyone needs to be more conscious of that. I've definitely done that before. So trying to get better at managing that, but that's huge advice. Um, I will say for my start at NeoMed, for how I got started in research, um, I've never been a fan of cold emailing. I knew I wanted to work with Dr. Safadi just from looking at what NeoMed had to offer research wise. And I just showed up to his office one day. I just showed up, walked in, introduced myself, and talked to him. And that was that. And, we were off. And if I could do it again, I probably would do it again. And now most of my connections in research and beginning and doing projects and research comes from that exact encounter. I rarely email people. Every now and then I'll meet someone who will introduce me to someone, but for the most part, I'm very direct. I go up to folks who know me or I have a rapport with, and if I know they're doing research, more often than not, I'll pitch the project because I don't want to. I have this kind of mindset that I don't want to show up and like almost ask for a favor. Like, hey, do you have a research project for me? I sometimes like to show up and understand what this person likes to do and present with them. And I do a little bit of background research. Hey, is there a gap in what I'm looking at? Is this something this person would be interested in? And I show up and I say, hey, what if we do this? And I can help with that. I can run it because I know you're a really busy guy. I'm not, comparatively, obviously we're med students, we're busy, but comparatively, just like you said about the appendix. And that would be my advice is with that being said, I'm going to jump to the next question,
I just wanted
unless
to
you have
add
something to say.
something real
Yeah,
quick
go,
too.
go for it.
Just I think also like do give yourself some grace if projects don't work out like that because like I mean think about if you were getting your PhD instead of your MD, you would probably not be producing this many papers in this amount of time. Like you'd be producing probably, much more of like a logical like progression of like a larger project. But
Yeah,
like people who are getting their PhD generally do not produce like 10 papers in 4 years. Like that's a crazy number. So, and a lot of it is out of our control, which is kind of the frustrating part. I think the most frustrating is these residency programs have a lot of expectations about the quantity of research projects and publications and posters that you have, but sometimes it just doesn't get accepted for whatever reason. It was a competitive year. Like you applied to a, conference that has 70 poster spots and there were 2,000 posters submitted and you're a med student and everybody who, got a spot is at like an Ivy League like attending level. So
totally.
do give yourself some grace if you don't have a project that yields anything because you can still talk about it in your application. You can still talk about it on your interviews. And I think what comes across the most is if you are passionate about it and you actually did the work that you can talk about, that says a lot about you as a person that you stuck with something, even if it didn't, yield something that was tangible for your application. Like if you cared about a project, maybe it was like a public health project, maybe it was a volunteer project, less of a formal research experience. But those things also just make great talking points in an interview, which I know I haven't had any of residency interviews, but that is what I've heard overwhelmingly from anybody who's given me advice about that.
Totally agree.
Yeah, sorry,
Go
I'll
ahead.
jump off that real quickly. So something that I just found out since getting access to ERAS, which is the residency application service,
Mm.
all your research experiences, whether it's a poster, an abstract, a peer-reviewed, a non-peer-reviewed article, are all under the same umbrella when you apply to residency. A lot of people don't know that. I just found that out. So it's helpful to have anything to put in that category. And it's really helpful to have something that you can talk about extensively. There's not a worse feeling than putting something that you got thrown onto your residency application and someone asks you a question about it and you have no idea what the project is about. That looks really bad. You will probably not match there. But if it's something, if you have like 4 or 5 things that you put a lot of time into during med school, at least for the field that I'm in. I can't speak for you, Shahab, and the ortho bros, because sometimes it's a little more intense. But at least for neurology, it's like, hey, if you have like a few projects and you put a lot of time into them and you can convey that, then that works just fine. It doesn't have to be top journal publications. It helps. It helps you get the foot in the door. This is the last thing I want to say. Sorry.
No, go
Med
ahead.
students, we as med students typically get this all wrong. We want to have the most leadership, the most service, the most research, the highest grades, AOA, whatever. That stuff helps for sure get your foot in the door for an interview. Once you get to an interview, they want you to be A, normal, and B, be able to do your work, and C, be fun to be around. That's it. Okay? Everything that we're doing, M1, M2, M3, M4 year, is to get the interview. And then once you get an interview, just be yourself, be a normal person, be whatever, be fun. And that's be like an employable person. And I think that gets lost a lot of times in the rat race, like you're saying. So I wanted to put that out there somewhere.
That's a very, very good point. I've heard that actually exact same thing in orthopedics. Totally. Your whole app is just to get you the interview. And then in the interview, it's like, do we want to work with this guy for 4 or 5 years? It's that simple. Okay, I'm gonna jump now to probably my favorite question. I don't know if I said the last one was my favorite question or not, but this one's definitely my favorite question. We're gonna switch the favoritism. Um, what are, and you guys can list multiple, your favorite or highest recommended tools, applications, skills, etc., for doing medical research? What should people, M1s, etc., starting medical research get proficiency in? Or what did you wish you knew how to do or have that you didn't when you started?
I think in general, Zotero or a similar resource manager is integral to a lot of different research, especially reviews. It'll make your life so much easier if you have something that you can just export and it automatically updates within the either Google Doc or Word doc that you're working with, because it is a nightmare to go through. You only do it one time where you add a reference somewhere and have to change 52 that are below it. And if you miss one, it's a nightmare. So Zotero takes all that out the window. That's the one I would really recommend. I'm not super familiar or well versed in a lot of these, but Zotero is definitely one that I would get familiar with.
Excellent.
Yeah, I would second that. I think that I've had that experience where you have to go through and change every single citation. Do not put
Never
yourself in
again.
that situation.
Me
Like
too.
it is so bad.
It's annoying.
And it takes so much time and it often happens in the middle of the night when you have to change it.
Oh
So I
God.
think In addition to Zotero, I think, NeoMed loves to talk about, oh, you should use our library, you should use our writing center. You actually should. Like, I promise they are literally so helpful. Special shout out to Colleen in the library. She has been a godsend to several projects of mine, and Brian in the writing center. Like, they know what they're doing. And I know NeoMed's always plugging them, but it's for a reason. And I think that everybody should take advantage because, it's part of the benefit of going to NeoMed that you have these resources and they can give you an answer so much faster than you trying to figure it out on your own. So just use the resources around you. Um, like I cannot recommend any online resource more than I can recommend those two services. So
Gotcha. So as of now, we have a citation manager and use the NeoMed libraries. I love both of those. I personally am an EndNote person for my citation manager. I've heard good things about Zotero. I tried it. I wasn't a fan. I've also had to use Mendeley, which is another citation manager. I wasn't that big of a fan of that one either. So EndNote was the one for me, and we used that in Safadi's lab. And that's another reason why I think people should do a basic science experience. You get into a basic science lab, and a PI can teach you about these things. Another thing we used was BioRender, which is for like generating figures. Um, if you're doing a review of pre-registration service like Prospero or Covidence for screening or Ryan for screening. And then I'll add one final thing. I recently started doing this, and I don't know if you guys want to chime in on this, but for stats, right? I was a bio guy in undergrad. Not, I was never really big in stats or biostats, and I'm just now starting to learn. Like I know we have to learn biostats for our exams and that kind of stuff, but really deep like biomedical clinical study stats, like meta-analyses, and using softwares like some folks use our studio. I just started using the SPSS statistical package for the social sciences. So being able to do your stats is also pretty key in my experience for doing research. And I think having some proficiency, or like you guys said earlier, having someone on your team have proficiency with being able to do that, projects will go more smoothly. We're all good. Sweet. Okay, this is my last question. Sorry to keep you guys for so long, but this is just wrapping it all up. Knowing everything you know now, if you were to start again as an M1, you know, it's day one at NeoMed, and you know you got to do, you know what you know now for doing research. What is the first thing you're gonna do?
I would reach out to an upperclassman, find someone who's interested in your field. All the at the organization fair, I don't know what they call it, but you'll walk around, you'll see booths. That's how I got interested in sign, and I met my people. There's an orthopedic surgery interest group, there's a surgery interest group. These people are great at connecting you. Oftentimes, a lot of doctors come in and speak. Um, just connect with people, just talk, and you'd be shocked at how many opportunities you'll get from just a conversation and showing interest, right? A lot of times we're nervous, we sit in the back, we eat our free lunch, and then we dip, right? I would try to avoid that, try to go up and talk and introduce yourself and say, hey, this is who I am. I'm interested in this. I'd love to work with you or one of your colleagues one day. It's hard to do, but getting comfortable doing that will open so many doors for you. I would just say get comfortable and be yourself. Reach out to someone who's not professional. You can reach out to myself, probably put our emails or something here. You can get in touch some way. If I don't, like I said, I don't have anything that I can do for you immediately. I can connect you with someone who does and who can. I think that goes for anyone on this panel. So
With before you go, Bridget, real quickly, I just want to say for anyone watching this who wants to contact us, I think we're all completely open to being contacted, but we should all be in the NeoMed registry. So like first letter, first name, last name, you just put it in Outlook email and shoot us an email. But sorry, Bridget, go. Great points, by the way, Sean.
yeah, I definitely agree with Sean. I think, just even just going up to people and sharing like your specific interests within the field has opened up like that's opened up so many doors for me. I'm most interested in pediatric ophthalmology, like, doing a fellowship in that. And I can't even tell you the number of opportunities that just stating that to like different attendings has gotten me. Especially like if you go to conferences, like I think M1, M2, I would definitely try to take advantage of, try to go to at least one conference, like that of something you're interested in. It doesn't have to be like the biggest one or whatever. It's actually sometimes better if it's a slightly smaller one, more intimate, and you get to talk to more people. But And like when you're
Mhm.
at that conference, be like, if it doesn't matter if you're an introvert, extrovert, when you're there, you say, okay, I'm here. I'm making the most of every minute that I'm here. I'm networking with everyone in sight. Like just full send. Like I'm going up to randos and talking to them and just asking them who they are, basically. Um, that is great to build connections with people and learn more about the fields that you're interested in. And once you hit M3, you have to like be presenting in order to go to a conference. So like the time to go to conferences, like just to network and not present would be during M1 and M2. And then this is the thing that I most wanted to say for this question, which I feel like this is probably not the right thing to say, but I feel like start early because I think when I was in M1, everybody said, "Oh, don't worry about research right now. You need to focus on school," which is true. Like, school is your top priority. If you are having any kind of struggle in school, focus on that. Um, and not to say that you need to like start doing research on day one of med school, but start thinking about it. Think about what your interests are. Think about who you could be reaching out to and start building those connections. Because like by the time I started reaching out to people, it took like 4 to 5 months after I started reaching out to actually like be working on a project. And then like I didn't have anything published for like a year after that, basically. So just be mindful of that. Like it does take time. Once you submit something to a journal, it takes like at least 6 months sometimes to actually get it published. So just keep in mind that I don't mean to stress anybody out who's watching this. If you have not started, you are not behind. There's always an opportunity to get involved. But if you feel like you have the bandwidth to at least just like send some emails out, have a Zoom call with an attending who might be willing to do research with you, that will help you in the long run.
Great answers across the board. I love the conference talk. I love doing that as well. You go to a conference, you chat with people about their projects, even open the ideas of collaborating with them and get like a LinkedIn or something, get a phone number just to stay in touch. Um, for my answer to this question, I think knowing what I know now, probably the most bang for my buck. And if I only could do one thing and I had to do it right at the beginning, would probably be set up a meeting with Dr. Stofko because that was really transformational for me. When I met with her to talk about just what my general med school interests were, because I think the College of Medicine for like M1s or very early on, they have you meet with your advisor, Dr. Stofko, someone to like get an idea of what your game plan is or what you want out of med school and out of your career. She wants to talk and figure out some of the folks who might be going to more competitive residencies that might need more research. So I had a conversation with her and asked her, hey, how do I get the ball rolling on this thing? And she just resource after resource after resource. And I didn't have to go hunting for them, or I didn't have to ask a bunch of different people or collate my own knowledge. She had it. She just gave it all, which was a phenomenal way to get the ball rolling for me. And so that would be my answer to that. All right, guys. Well, it's been a great chat. Any final remarks? I
Nope,
think we
this is
covered
a
them.
great idea. This is hopefully helpful to a lot of people to get the ball rolling. So thank you for setting this up, Shao.
Yeah. Thank you guys for being here. Um, and with that being said, for the folks who are watching, feel free to email us at any time. We should all be in the NEOMED registry. So Outlook, last name. And I think we'd be happy to answer any more questions about getting started in medical research. Thanks, guys.